I'm Tiffany Meier. New Iran escalation concerns as the president threatens suspected nuke sites. That's coming up right now. The president threatens attack on Iran's Pickaxe mountain after reports the Islamic Republic moved centrifuges there.
We'll be hitting that area probably pretty soon, and there's not a thing they can do about it.
As the Secretary of War facing questions about war funding on Capitol Hill. The U.S. pausing $1 billion in Medicaid funding to California and Minnesota.
If those states want that money, they need to provide documentation that these payments are legitimate.
Former President Biden losing a court fight to keep his own words under wrap. Now hours of private audio could soon be made public. And Bruce Springsteen told to stick with singing. What rocker is blasting the boss's politics? Welcome to Tiffany Meier Tonight. Breaking now, CENTCOM saying the U.S. launching its 11th straight night of airstrikes, adding the strikes are designed to continue degrading Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump earlier threatening to hit Iran's Pickaxe mountain site as Congress questioned Secretary of War Pete Hegseth over the war and the money to pay for it. The president threatening the site, which is described as a heavily fortified underground complex tied to Iran's nuclear program. President Trump saying the U.S. thinks Iran may have moved centrifuges deep into the site.
It doesn't mean anything unless they have the material. You're talking about the centrifuges. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything unless they have the material. They don't have. We follow the material. That's where the action is, and we'll be hitting that area probably pretty soon. And there's not a thing they can do about it. Normally I wouldn't say that. If I thought they could do something about it, I would never say that. But we'll be hitting that area pretty soon, and very heavily.
The escalation threat coming as Hegseth testifies before the Senate Appropriations Committee. The Secretary of War telling lawmakers what he says the war has cost so far.
$37.5 billion.
And that represents the cost of the war through what period of time?
Through now for certain aspects of it, but also mill pay, O&M, other anticipated costs through September 30th, Senator.
Republicans pushing a $95 billion budget package to fund the war, along with aid for farmers and voting law changes. So the fight over Iran is now being waged on the battlefield and in Congress. And breaking now, the Department of War announcing the identity of the third American soldier believed killed in Friday's attack on that airbase in Jordan. U.S. Central Command saying Sergeant Angel as Rompersand, 28 of Queens, New York, believed to have been killed in action Friday in the same attack that killed First Lieutenant James Feehan and Private Isabella Gonzalez. Rampersad previously announced as missing. And joining me now with more, Harley Littman, foreign policy and geopolitical analyst and founder of Genesis 10. Harley, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to have you. Now, Secretary Hegseth testified today that the military has spent about $37 billion on the war with Iran, but he downplayed Iran in his funding request, saying the budget ask is to meet a, quote, generational challenge. How are you reading this?
Yes, he bundled it somewhat by adding in salary increases for military personnel, recruitment, and other costs. But war costs money, and especially today, it's very expensive. It comes down to like anything when you're looking at a budget. Is it worth it? And if you feel that the threat from Iran is real and it endangers the United States and our allies, then this is what we have to pay to make sure that Iran doesn't have hegemony in the Middle East.
And expanding on that, it seems the U.S. military may be cutting funding from other areas to fund the Iran war. Is this concerning?
Well, it all depends on what they're doing with funding for the Iran war. I suspect they're focusing on new generation. To Secretary of War's Defense, he pointed out that the Pentagon is now led by very sophisticated, successful businessmen and tech leaders, as well as people of merit who are looking at this as, and I pretty much quote him, as running it like a business, meaning they're looking for real tangible outcomes, real results. They're not running it as a bureaucracy. So I believe that they're investing a lot in the new age technology of warfare, which is mostly drone and missile warfare. And I think that's going to be the difference, along with AI, as to who will prevail on the battlefield in the future.
And Harley, this is the 11th consecutive night we are carrying out strikes against Iran. President Trump said today that the Iranians are, quote, desperately trying to talk, but the United States is not interested in talking until they believe Iran is negotiating in good faith. What do you expect to see going forward?
Well, there's no such thing as Iran negotiating in good faith. They look at negotiations tactically and strategically. In other words, not in terms of the Western sense of making an agreement, honoring the agreement, making compromises, which is what you do when, and I quote President Trump, if they're going to have meaningful negotiations. So we have to have no illusions that this is a ideological regime that is a dictatorship. It's a death cult. They worship martyrdom. They believe in jihad. They want to convert the world to the Muslim way of living and religion. And that's their own words. It's not propaganda. It's not warmongering. No nation in American history has ever been more obsessed with destroying the United States than Iran. So we have to take what they're saying very seriously. I would add that I think it's arrogance to think we know better what they mean than their own words. If they say they want to destroy America, believe them.
And given that, President Trump said today that the U.S. would, in fact, target Pickaxe Mountain, which is about a mile from where the U.S. bombed last year, taking out an Iranian nuclear site. Now, recent reports suggest that Iran has moved centrifuges there. Now, President Trump says he normally wouldn't telegraph military operations, but that at this point, Iran can't do anything about it. How much would you say we have degraded Iran's military capabilities?
Well, no one knows exactly. Certainly, we have significantly. I mean, just given the punishing effect of these air raids that have taken place day after day after day with our really good intel. Unless your boots on the ground in Iran, will you know? But we're degrading it dramatically. And in fact, what's interesting about President Trump's press conferences is for the first time, he's using the words degrade their military effectiveness. He's not saying obliterate, destroying it completely. I think he's become aware that even when you're highly effective, nothing is 100%. Even if we destroyed them by 80, 90%, that could still leave hundreds, even thousands of missiles in their disposal. So he has to be careful about overpromising when I think legitimately he could claim tremendous tactical victories. A lot of people will argue that Iran is winning. But here's the question I have. How are they winning when they can't protect their own leaders, not only top leaders, but second tier and third tier leaders? How are they winning when they can't defend their country, when their air defenses are wiped out, their Navy, their Air Force? They're winning because you're looking at the lowest bar possible, which is they're surviving. So, and they're able to do damage by launching missiles into neighboring countries. But I would not describe that as winning. By fear, they're able to close the Strait of Hormuz. And so President Trump has finally taken the decision that it looks like we have to take the Strait of Hormuz because you can't let Iran control the most important bottleneck in the world. 20% of the world's oil comes through the Strait of Hormuz, as well as fertilizer, which Africa desperately needs and can't come any other way except through the Strait of Hormuz. So what he's doing is really a good thing for America and for the world.
And Harley, expanding on that, on Iran's side, the Houthis threatened recently to blockade the Red Sea, and two oil tankers carrying solid crude did have to reverse course in the Red Sea today. Now, President Trump said if something like that happens, we take care of it. Do you think we'll see the scope of this conflict expand now?
Probably, but I think that's actually a positive outcome because if you don't finish the job, if you will, and have regime change, This will go on forever, tit for tat. They will continually try to make sure they have control of the Strait of Hormuz. They've discovered that they have strategic leverage, which is actually more important to them than nuclear weapons. So they are going to do everything possible, because having control of the Strait of Hormuz not only gives them tremendous control with all their Arab neighbors, but it also gives them an unusual level of influence, leverage, and control over the whole world, because the world depends on the freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. And if Iran controls it and makes money on it by charging tolls, that is a victory for Iran. So the United States has to make sure that that doesn't happen, because if they do control the Strait of Hormuz, you've now created a terrible precedent where there are other choke points in the world, the Straits of Gibraltar, the Malacca Straits in Indonesia. We're already seeing the Houthis closing Mandeb al-Bab, another choke point. This speaks to freedom of navigation. These are open waterways. You can't let any country control it. And the United States has gone to war twice over that historically. The War of 1812, when the British would seize U.S. ships and we didn't have freedom of navigation. And World War I, when German submarines were conducting unrestricted warfare, torpedoing American civilian liners. And the United States went to war over that. So freedom of navigation is critical for the world. And the United States has taken a leadership role. But the countries that are affected most by it are actually Asia and Africa. And that's why these countries should join in this effort with the United States. The United States could at some point perhaps offload it and outsource it to the nations that use the Strait of Hormuz, because the United States really doesn't need it very much.
A lot at stake for sure. Harley Lipman, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And coming up, 2 states accused of massive Medicaid fraud. Now nearly $1 billion being held back. Our panel weighs in, and here they come. Welcome back. The Trump administration putting more than $1 billion in Medicaid money on hold for California and Minnesota, saying it suspects fraud and noncompliance in how those states are spending federal funds. In Washington today, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saying the federal government deferring hundreds of millions of dollars in Medicaid payments to both states.
That includes more than $867 million for California and over $200 million for Minnesota. If those states want that money, they need to provide documentation that these payments are legitimate. In Minnesota, the funding involves 14 high-risk areas that Minnesota's own legislative auditor has identified as especially vulnerable to fraud. In California, we suspect much of the questionable spending involves in-home services.
The White House calling the pause part of its, quote, unrelenting war on fraud, and it's the latest payment pause aimed at Democratic-run states. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz calling the deferral political retribution, accusing the administration of punishing vulnerable patients instead of fraudsters, and saying Washington is cutting more health care money than it has recovered in fraud cases. California Governor Gavin Newsom saying the move a recycled political stunt, claiming his state is being targeted for political reasons, even as he says California will work with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services in good faith to combat fraud. Newsom defending the state's in-home program, saying it saves money by keeping seniors and disabled people out of costlier nursing homes. So for now, the money is frozen, not gone. California and Minnesota working to get documents back to the CMS to try to get the funds released. Joining me now, our most excellent panel, Joshua Phillip, host of the Joshua Phillip Show, Taylor Hathorn, visiting fellow at the Independent Women's Center for American Safety and Security, and Chris Bob, Entity's political correspondent. Thank you all so much for being here. So the federal government is going to defer more than $1 billion in Medicaid payments to California and Minnesota while the states provide documentation of their payments. Josh, let's start with you. What do you think?
I think it's about time. They've been threatening for a while. Much of this started with, of course, Minnesota. They found these Somali scam rings were stealing We don't even know how much money, maybe billions of dollars through childcare fraud rings. Investigative journalists like Nick Shirley came out, exposed it, punished for it, labeled, even though all the evidence was there. California, in Los Angeles alone, you have hospice care, which just multiplied in number. You have more hospice care centers created almost overnight within a few years than almost the entire nation, and they don't have the people to justify it. And rather than actually investigate it, what are the states doing? Well, in Minnesota, they punished the whistleblowers. And so the whistleblowers are being punished, and the government's covering it up, obviously, locally. And in California, the investigative journalist, Nick Shirley, they've even created an act to try to block him from doing investigative work. So I do think they need to put it on.
Shirley Act or something like that. It was literally called that. Yeah.
It's insane. So I think we do need to wait and see what happens, and I think they need to, show the papers, show the documents.
All right, Taylor?
All right, so my initial thoughts are also about time, but I think one of the things that we need to focus on is, I want to just look at the numbers, and I don't normally read off this, but I think that this is really important. So Medi-Cal is the nation's largest Medicaid program, the nation's largest. It is 16% of California is home to about 11% of the population, but that is demonstrably less than the amount of money they use. So of the $222 billion that they get, 70% of that comes from the federal government. So the math to me is absolutely not mathing. And I think when Governor Newsom and anyone else who's like trying to shirk responsibility of this and saying, well, this is Trump trying to bother everyone, like this is Trump just attacking us politically. I mean, he might not like you. I don't like you either, but if your data didn't show what your data showed, then it wouldn't be problematic. But I do think if I had any cautionary tale to the Trump administration, the American public, they see this number, $222 billion, $138 billion, $544 million. They see these numbers and it's so big. It's too big to comprehend. The Trump administration needs to do a better job of breaking this down as to what it is costing you per tax dollar, what you are losing in your family home in terms of your tax dollars because of the fraud that's being committed. If they were paying me to do that job, I would tell them to do that.
Well, not to mention that we're picking up like the welfare tab for California, like out of state. It's insane.
All right, Chris?
Let alone the welfare tab.
Let
me tell you this. In California through Medi-Cal, the real issue here is not that people are going to lose access to Medicaid and they have a heart surgery scheduled, but now RFK is stepping in with Dr. Oz and they're not going to get, no, it's not the thing. This is about the reimbursements that you get. And the state reimburses quite a bit. They reimburse exorcisms no, this is true. In California, you could get an exorcism and then they need state money to come back, and you would hope they're getting more of them. Because they got some possessed people. Anyway, but in Minnesota and California, that's about 17.6% of all people in the Medicaid system. In California alone, 10 million people are on Medicaid.
Well, so the problem is they don't allow citizenship checks.
Yeah, well that's
crazy.
That's a point that I was going to make. And the other thing is the reimbursements are out of control. And they want just so much money. And the home care workers too. Like, let's say you have a condition, you claim you have a condition that requires you to have someone come in and become an aid to you. They're operating rate-wise, because we already established that they have more people on the program, but rate-wise, they have like 4 times the amount of home care workers than other states, than as the median is. So it's just a lot of strange anomalies happening in California. And this is kind of just, this initial thing is just kind of evidence that there's a bigger problem.
Question. How much does an exorcism go for these days?
That's the real question. I might have to relocate.
I want to know now, man. Yeah,
at least $5.
I'm bringing my steaks. I'm bringing my water.
And then you need to add some zeros. All right, well, speaking of finding out certain things, let's go where we are, basically, because New Jersey's governor, Mikey Sherrill, said today that nearly 400 non-citizens voted in the state after the state mistakenly added more than 6,000 non-citizens to state voter rolls. That was between June 2023 and 2024. Now, this comes days after the Trump administration found 250,000 non-citizens on voter lists in 4 states and announced plans to work with states to secure elections. The White House responded, calling on lawmakers to pass the Save America Act. Taylor, let's start with you on this one. What are your thoughts?
My initial thoughts are the thing that they keep telling us isn't happening is happening. And you hear these numbers where they're like, well, it's only 4,000. How many is too much for you? How much voter fraud is the amount of voter fraud that you're not comfortable with? Because for me, it's one person voting in our national elections that are not American citizens is too many. The America First Policy Institute found out from the data that they pulled that at least that they know of, 400 people who are non-American citizens voted in elections. That is enough in a lot of local elections to swing an election. I mean, less than 1% of a population votes for their state legislature. And so you're sitting there looking at that and going, that's enough to swing an election. And so I have major issues with this. The bigger issue that I actually have is right now that the lieutenant governor, who also serves as New Jersey Secretary of State, refused the DOJ's request in February for the unredacted information voter file. They will not work with the Department of Justice. And so they've got this countersuit going back and forth. I'm sure you know a little bit more about it. But they're going back and forth over this, and they're saying, we're not going to give you this information, but there's nothing to hide. But we're not going to give it to you, even though there's nothing to hide. And to me, just give them the information. I don't get it.
All right, Chris, I know you're chomping at the bit.
I am, but 6,600 non-citizens survived the New Jersey DMV.
Survive.
And they were given citizenship. That's patriotism right there. If you can make it through, imagine a DMV in New York, I know is bad, but in New Jersey, you can only imagine what goes on in there, what type of hell these people are going through. But the Save America Act has to come up when this is being discussed because, again, like Taylor said, this is the thing that everyone keeps being gaslit to some extent. That is, not going on, but is actually going on.
The Democrats and my ex-boyfriend.
There you go. And they're all conspiring together. Everyone's ex-boyfriend and girlfriend is conspiring together. But Trump is going to stop them, hopefully. That's the Republican claim. But I think, regardless of what happens with the Save America Act, whether it goes through, whether it's adopted through a budget thing, whatever, how it's implemented, if it's done through kind of an incentive process, as they're trying to do now in the House, the issue is real. And this has just been demonstrated.
I also think, and you might want to touch on this too, but I also think that I want to know if these people, the 400 that they know of for sure, are going to be prosecuted.
Well,
because
no,
you don't
it's not their
accidentally.
fault.
I don't believe that. You don't accidentally vote if you're not allowed to vote in a country. I lived in the UAE my entire life, and I didn't go up somewhere and be like, well, I'm accidentally a citizen here now.
No, but the governor didn't establish that the 400 remained non-citizens. They only said that they were non-citizens.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, this whole thing, to me, crisis management, and it's about them blocking the real investigations. Because look, 4 different states, 250,000 illegal alien or non-citizen registered to vote, 400,000 deceased people on the voter rolls, but they were sending out universal mail-in ballots, meaning everybody registered is getting a ballot. New Jersey's blocking the investigations alongside, the 46 states that are also blocking or not going through with it. To me, this seems like crisis management. And they're saying, okay, we're doing the footwork. Look, we found problems. We're fixing them. When in reality, I think it's a lot worse than that.
Did you see in the press release with the New Jersey governor, he blamed Donald Trump?
Yeah, but
there you go.
Well, let's talk about a former president, because an appeals court has rejected Joe Biden's bid to block the government's release of audio recordings and transcripts of interviews he gave his ghostwriter, with 2 of the panel of 3 judges finding there is substantial public interest in this material. Now, the interviews were from before Biden was president, and he had argued it was a matter of privacy. They were the center of some controversy towards the end of his presidency when Special Counsel Robert Hur referred to them in his investigation of Biden's handling of classified documents and noted memory issues. Now, Biden has until August 3rd to appeal this decision. Taylor, let's start with you. Do you agree with the judge's decision? We have a lightning round for answers this time.
I do agree with where they're at currently. The only thing that I would bring up is that if the Biden and the team Biden is going to say that the Trump administration is weaponizing the DOJ pot, meat, kettle, whenever I see a Democrat president have a mugshot, then we can talk.
All right, Chris?
It was a bipartisan, you can think of it, decision.
Yep.
You can look, the only person who didn't want this to happen was a Biden appointee, a judge. There was a Trump-appointed judge that wanted it to go through. There was a Obama-appointed judge that wanted it to go through. And I'm looking forward to the Biden administration with director's commentary.
All right, Josh?
I think it's good and I think it's necessary. People were questioning Trump's cognitive ability, and if it turns out that Biden was not if he was suffering from really bad dementia prior to the election, it means that somebody else is calling the shots. And so I think the American people need to know.
Recirculates autopin.
There you go.
Well, we'll have a lot more to get to. First off, a break, though, because coming up, Cuba. The State Department's new report on the small island with the massive regional influence and how the U.S. sees it as a hotbed of communist danger. That's next. Welcome back. Now to the human cost of socialism. In places like Cuba and Venezuela, the lives of citizens squeezed hard by systems that limit not only freedom, but opportunity. The State Department now focusing on Cuba. It released a 100-page report Monday called Cuba, Capital of 21st Century Communism, which blames the island for everything from unrest surrounding the death of George Floyd to the rise of Antifa. And joining me now with more, Jorge Gerasati, president of the Economic Inclusion Group. Jorge, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to have you. Now, President Trump mentioned Venezuela earlier today during his meeting with the Lebanese president. Let's take a listen.
We took over Venezuela. We now have a great relationship with Venezuela. We went to war with Venezuela, and the war ended in one day. And we have now an incredible relationship with Venezuela. We're taking out millions of barrels of oil. They're making more money now than they ever made before, ever. And we're making a lot of money. We paid for the war many times over with Venezuela. We lost nobody.
Is Venezuela's economy doing better now than it was before?
I mean, all Venezuelans, we are very optimistic about the future of the country. Right now, the economy is not yet doing better. However, we are on the right track because the United States has a transition plan for Venezuela. This transition plan includes a period of stabilization, then recovery, and then democratization of the country. And there is internationally companies, investment firms, and pretty much in all sectors, people are interested in investing in the Venezuelan economy. We're on the right track. What we need is the right reforms. With the right reforms, the Venezuelan economy can grow at double digits for the next 10 years.
And on that optimism part, political dissidents were heavily suppressed under Maduro's regime. Has that situation improved over the past few months?
Yes, many people have been released. Many political prisoners have been released. Once again, Venezuelans can express themselves with more openness. You see civil society expressing themselves more politically and socially and culturally. So Venezuela is a country that is changing, is leaving behind its past of authoritarianism and is going forward to a system of more free markets and democracy. Again, the job is not done yet. It's a transition process, but everything goes in the right direction so far.
Now, it's not just Venezuela, because the State Department recently published a report on Cuba titled Cuba, the Capital of 21st Century Communism. What was your biggest takeaway from that report?
It's something I myself have been analyzing for the past 5 years about how Cuba and Venezuela have become hubs for authoritarianism. Cuba has become as a disease that is spreading socialism in Latin America and in Venezuela. Because think about it, Venezuela used to be one of the 20 richest countries in the world. It was open to markets, it was giving prosperity to its people, until they embraced socialism, socialism that was promoted by Cuba. What the State Department report shows is how Cuba and Venezuela were also working together to facilitate Iran, to help Iran have a foothold in the Western Hemisphere. It is really problematic and it's something that has to change. I completely agree with the administration in the sense that the American continent has to be a continent free from communism, free from authoritarianism, because that's the future. We really need to embrace markets. The Latin American people, we all want it. Latin Americans, we want better relations with the US, we want only relations with democracies, and we want to have freer economies. As I was mentioned to you, all businesses, when I talk to people in New York or in Switzerland or everywhere, all businesses are extremely optimistic about Venezuela. They see Venezuela a country that is abundant on oil, natural gas, mining capacities, has perfect geographical location. It can be a hub of connection between the US, Latin America, and Europe. But what we need is a country that is safe from communism, that is safe from organized crime, and I think we're moving forward in that direction.
And Jorge, here in the United States, we're seeing a rise in socialism, or those who claim to be democratic socialists. Now, having lived in a socialist country, what would you want Americans to know about life under socialism?
The most important thing for people who are listening and for people who believe in socialism is that everywhere where socialism has been implemented, it has left misery, poverty, repression. It has brought societies backwards. In no place in history has socialism worked. That does not mean that when people are concerned about groceries, when people are concerned about paying their apartment every month, those concerns are valid. But the solution to that is better public policies. The solution to that is to have better economic policies, open market. The solution is never more socialism. Because think about it, countries like Venezuela, but not only Venezuela, have destroyed in one decade what it took a century to build. That is the problem of socialism, is that breaking an economic system is something that can be done so fast. Right now, 80% of my people live in poverty, 50% of people live in extreme poverty, and 30% of my people have had to left the country. And this is because of this socialist mentality that only punishes those who work really hard.
And zooming out a bit here, Communist China has long maintained close ties with both the Maduro and the Cuban communist regimes. How significant is the CCP's role in backing those socialist and communist governments in the region?
China was, until the beginning of this year, late of last year, the main beneficiary from this situation. China was getting most of the oil coming from Venezuela. 70% of the oil coming from Venezuela was going to China. Similarly, they were getting all the oil coming from Iran, so China was benefited. After the Trump administration and their actions, what they did is that they took away all these resources from China. They really changed the strategic positioning on that aspect. China, for ideological reasons and for many reasons, have been a strong ally of countries like Venezuela. They have most of the oil rights of many of the biggest oil facilities, gold facilities in Venezuela, but all this is changing. I really think that China understands that also the American continent is a part of the US area of influence, and I think that's the status quo going further.
Oh, Jorge Gerasati, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tiffany.
And we have a lot more news coming up, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
On stone, renowned for liberty, a call will ring out to end a persecution in China, and a march for those attacked for their beliefs. Watch our live special coverage of human rights champions and many others calling for an end to the persecution of Falun Dafa. Thursday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, only on NTD.
Welcome back. Tonight we're feeling a bit of game lag with the World Cup over, so let's hit the reset button and roll out a panel favorite. I decided we're going to play How Wild Is This? So I serve up a headline from this week, and the panel rates how wild it is on a whiteboard, 10 being oh so very wild and 1 meh. So back with me, our most excellent panel, Joshua Phillip, host of The Joshua Phillip Show, Taylor Hathorn, visiting fellow at the Independent Women's Center for American Safety and Security, and Chris Bobb, NTD's political correspondent. Thank you all so much for being back with us. So the latest move by the Trump administration to crack down on waste and fraud. The U.S. Treasury announced today that it screened hundreds of millions of federal payments and blocked thousands of them, totaling nearly $100 million, before they were sent to deceased people. Earlier today, Secretary Bessent joined Fox Business's Mornings with Maria to discuss the move. Let's take a listen.
This is part of what President Trump calls his common sense agenda. It's common sense. And President Trump issued an executive order for us to be able to go to the do not pay, to have it interact with the Treasury payment systems. And as a result, so far we've saved about $100 million, payments that didn't go to deceased people, and that would have gone out. We think that there's up to $350 million that we can stop before the end of this year, and that goes along with the Vice President's task force on eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. The GAO estimates that it might be, this number might be up to $500 billion, which is about 1.66% of GDP. So that could go a long way towards paying down the debt, providing more services, and this is just the start, Maria. What's important here is that we are stopping the money from going out. So once the money gets out, trying to retrieve it is very, very difficult.
All right, Josh, let's start with you. How wild is this?
I'm giving it a 3. As in 1/3 of the actual problem, because if they're saying that it's like, 3 times this, I want to know what the rest is. Also, $500 billion possibly going to fraud is an insane amount, and I want to see that gone after too. So this is 1/3 of the problem addressed, and I hope to keep going with it.
Beautiful. Taylor?
All right, I'm going to say it's a 6 for the 6th sense, because why are dead people ever getting money? I think it is crazy that it took us this much time to make sure that the Social Security Administration and the Treasury Department are talking back and forth to each other. How much money do I spend in taxes every year? Communicate with each other. And again, to the Trump administration, please get a graphic together of how much this is costing each American taxpayer per household. It will save you a lot of time.
I will add one more point that it's a 3 also because it's 1/3 of my taxes, because like a third of like
there
the GDP,
I like this
of
number,
taxes
but
going to
mine's
this.
funnier.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
All right, Chris?
I'd say a 10. And here's why. First of all, a message to the dead first. You can't take it with you, guys. It's terrible.
They did?
No,
they
did. They didn't.
They did.
Their family did. But at least they tried to.
Tiffany, you should cut us
and that's who's probably perpetrating a lot of the fraud going on. But the real thing is, this is basic bookkeeping. Figure out if someone's dead and stop sending them money. But they can't even get that right. They're talking about $500 billion, $350 billion. That's a lot of money. And you can only imagine, historically, how everything turned out. So yeah, they should get on this stuff. They should have been on this stuff. And I'm actually disappointed they never were.
And none of it would have happened without the Trump EO that everyone said
Exactly.
It was not necessary, it was ridiculous, and look what
Here
it
you
turned
go.
into.
Beautiful. Let's switch gears a bit to prediction markets. So let's talk about elections. AOC and Jon Ossoff are now tied in odds to win the 2028 Democratic presidential nomination on Polymarket. Gavin Newsom is still leading both of them on Polymarket. Chris, I know you love markets, so especially betting markets. How wild is this?
This is a 5 because I know it doesn't look like a 5. Just come on, forget about it. It's a 5 because Pete Buttigieg is polling at 5 and Michelle Obama is polling at less than 1%. So the only reason why I think Ossoff is on that list is because there wasn't like a none of the above option. I don't think, besides him being in the Senate, as opposed to AOC just being a regular old congressperson, and him being a little bit more appealing to wealthy donors, I don't see anything, amazing that would prompt him to be at the top of the list. I just think he was a recognizable name that's been getting a lot of attention recently.
You think either will beat Gavin Newsom?
You know me. I think AOC has a shot.
I do know you. Taylor?
All right. I'm going to go with 10, and I have 2 reasons that I'm going with 10. Number 1, American women and Americans as a whole still love tall men as presidents, okay? Jon Ossoff is a good-looking man. He's tall. I think that this is a big deal. Additionally, I also think that I want to list it as a 10 because about 6 months ago, I was on NTD, and I was asked who I thought the Democratic frontrunner would be, and I would like a clip pulled up at some point of me saying that I thought it was going to be Jon Ossoff, and my co-panelists laughed at me. So when it happens, it probably was you. Yeah. I'm gonna find out who it was if it wasn't him, and I'm gonna come for you and I'm gonna see, I told you so. So 10.
All right, Josh.
I'm giving it a 5, but unlike
That's an F.
Chris's,
That's worse than
Do you guys know how to write numbers?
Chris's, it is intentionally made to look like an S.
All right,
Okay.
let's
And
hear
S
it.
is for socialism.
Okay.
Which is not going to be a working policy at the federal level for national elections. I think it went on the local level, but not for national elections.
But he calls himself a fiscal conservative and a progressive policymaker. And so I think he is a sleeper a little bit because he comes across as someone who cares about fiscal conservatism with a Southern accent. So,
Remember, so did Castro.
yeah.
All right, well, speaking of weighing in on politics, Journey's rock star Jonathan Cain is blasting fellow musician Bruce Springsteen for his political rants about President Trump at his concerts. Here's what Cain said on podcast The Complete Disaster Network. Let's take a listen.
I used to be a Democrat back in the old days, but I just couldn't go there anymore, you know. And guys like Bruce Springsteen should shut up, you know, really. Honestly, shut up, Bruce, you know. Him and who's the other one?
It keeps him.
Yeah, Robert De Niro. I mean, who cares, guys, you know, really?
Yeah.
You know, do your art. I try to keep politics out of my music.
All right, and here's a clip where Springsteen was going off on the Trump administration during a concert earlier this year in London. Let's listen to that. All right, Taylor, let's start with you. How wild is this?
All right, I'm going to go 1 because that's the only song that anyone under the age of like 45 can name of his. And so it's right there. So I'm going to go with a 1. But honestly, someone who's been to one of his concerts and has been on the receiving end of this, just like, look, I get it. Use your platform for whatever you want to use your platform for. But quite literally, no one in the audience, even the ones that agree with you, care. So just shut up and play.
All right, Josh?
I'm doing an 8, but it's
I'm
also
enjoying this.
It's also a clown face. The reason is we don't need entertainers trying to preach to us about politics. They're clowns, not politicians, and they're not politicians for a reason.
All right, Chris.
I say $17.50. Because that's how much probably a beer costs if you go to one of the Springsteen concerts. You know, you pay for the ticket, you pay the fees, you probably pay to park, and then you buy a $17.50 beer, and then you realize you're not going to hear anyone sing. You're going to hear whatever that was. I mean, did you hear that? He's given this lecture. It sounded like he was going to call someone on stage and then start praying for them. Like you have the praise band in the background with the guitar, and he's talking about the elections.
At least that would have led to a
revival. At least that would have led to a revival, exactly.
They should have
But it was,
done that.
it's
They
just
should have had
ridiculous,
that,
but I
actually.
enjoy this rock feud because it's the first sponsored by AARP. That's all I'll say.
That's a great job.
All right, well, on that note, thank you all so much for joining us in Gamifying the News. Coming up, though, a tiny NASA craft on a 2.5 billion mile voyage to an asteroid field. Tonight, the science and the beauty behind its flyby of the red planet. That's next. Good vibes shot of the day now. Martian flyby edition. NASA's Psyche spacecraft swinging by Mars on its way to an asteroid in the belt between the red planet and Jupiter. During a flyby in mid-May, the craft turning its cameras on the red planet, capturing a series of images that NASA has now turned into a mesmerizing time lapse. The team using the pass to put Psyche's imager through its paces, testing calibration, sensitivity to scattered light, and even picking out Mars's tiny moons, Phobos and Deimos, from very far away. It's a practice run for the eventual search for any small moonlets orbiting the asteroid Psyche. The flyby not just about the imagery, swinging past Mars, also giving the spacecraft extra speed and locking in its path toward the asteroid belt. NASA saying Psyche now on the right trajectory to rendezvous with its namesake asteroid in the summer of 2029. And you could say we're psyched for our good vibes shot of the day. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Tiffany Meier Tonight. I'm Tiffany Meier, and we'll see you tomorrow.